Yeah, Hickory Golf is the generic term given to golf using equipment that was either made or is designed to resemble golf clubs pre-1935. That was what was considered to be the end of the period where golf clubs had wooden shafts. And they could be hickory, which was what it was in the vast majority of the time, or occasionally you could also get them in what's called split cane or bamboo. Yeah, well, there's two factors. One, obviously, the actual weight of the golf clubs is distributed differently. Wooden shafts tended to have slightly lighter heads um, because the weight distribution would be different between a steel shaft and a wooden shaft. The golf club heads in those days were smaller in size, slightly less forgiving. Um, Steel shafts being easier to produce and mass produce became the sort of standard very quickly. But basically, the difference in performance is steel shafts probably added maybe 10% to your performance, but no more. The type of clubs that were made are very, very similar to what you have today. It was an era where there was also another change which was going on, where golf clubs moved from being known with individual names to becoming numbered. So today we talk about a set of irons, probably starting with a 3-iron and ending up with the sand wedge. In those days, those clubs would actually have names. So instead of having a 3-iron, you would have what was called a mid-iron. Instead of having a 5-iron, you'd probably have a club called a mashie, and so forth, ending up with your wedge, which would have been known as a niblick. Yeah, well, actually, ironically, one company in particular, actually Cleveland, has started to reuse the old names to describe a modern club. So they've recently released a rescue club called a Mashie Rescue, basically meaning it's a 5-iron lofted rescue club. I'm guessing because I've only seen it. I haven't read any of the publicity, but typically golf clubs in those days all had names, and most of the names were actually derivatives from either mashie or niblick. So basically you started off with a couple of irons, one being the 5-iron, the mashie, and one being the wedge, the niblick. They decided that there was too big a gap between those, so they added one in between, and it became known as the mashie niblick. And after that, they decided they needed more, so then it became a mid-mashie. Then you got things like a spade mashie, a deep-faced mashie. So they were all derivatives of a theme, but each club, as we would know it by number today, had an equivalent name. Yes, it is. I mean, we have to be honest that golf equipment over the years has made the game easier and easier. Um, but it's still a game that any standard golfer could get a huge amount of pleasure from. It would be a bigger challenge because they're, by definition, the heads, as I mentioned earlier, are smaller. So the margin for error is also smaller. So mishits would not perform as well as a mishit golf club today, which is designed to almost cater for a mishit. So they're less generous, but when struck properly, actually perform remarkably well. Oh, absolutely. I mean, people look at golf as an aspirational sport because it has that reputation for having good manners or etiquette, if you want to use that word. And in many ways, one of the things about good etiquette is playing at a decent pace so that you don't make people have to stand around waiting. And that's one of the great things about Hickory Golf. You play golf courses which are a bit shorter, but you walk more fast, more quickly, and therefore you get round quickly. And that's actually showing a lot of respect to the people who are also in the golf course, not necessarily in the 4-ball that you're playing. No, I don't have a preference. What I would say is that they are very complementary. Um, I think most people who would be considered to be big fans of Hickory Golf wouldn't exclusively play Hickory Golf. They would probably still play with modern equipment as well. The big advantage about Hickory is you tend to play with less clubs, probably 5, 6, 7 clubs only, you tend to then carry them on your shoulder in a small pencil bag. So you walk everywhere, as opposed to, unfortunately, a lot of the big golf courses today, they're actually too long to walk and you end up having to take buggies. So one of the great pleasures of golf, which is the exercise, is lost. The other great thing is that because you've only got half as many clubs, you have to learn to improvise. You have to learn to actually try and manufacture a golf shot. And there is, in my view, no greater pleasure in golf than trying to manufacture a golf shot and it coming off.